Hello children, a very warm welcome to the virtual session again. So we'll continue with the chapter Force and Pressure, that is chapter 11. Here in this session we are going to see contact forces and non-contact forces which you have already learned. Let us have a look again. Contact forces, you have these forces, this kind of forces are applied only when two or more objects comes in contact with each other. This you know. Here you have learned the example like muscular force and frictional force. Two major types of forces which you have learned. And non-contact forces, this kind of forces are applied when the objects do not come in contact with each other, then too they exert a force upon each other. Like magnetic force, gravitational force, electrostatic force, nuclear force. Various types of forces which you have learned, children. Here we can see frictional force, gravity, here muscular force, drag force, buoyant force, tension force, magnetic force, spring force. Now, today's session we are going to watch a video on different types of forces which we have learned in a previous session. So kindly do watch the video carefully and you will clear with your concept. It will be a reinforcement for the concept which you have already learned. So before we go ahead with the chapter with few more new concepts, let us have a look on the types of forces. You do watch the video and enjoy, children. Thank you. Have a wonderful day.
Hi, I'm Miss Curious. I have a small quiz for you today. Observe with me my friends, James and Tina, who are involved in some activities. What do you think is common in all these scenarios? In all these scenarios, force is being applied to move or stop a body. However, the force applied is of different types. In this lesson, you will learn about the effects of force and the types of force. At the end of this lesson, you will be able to define force, identify the effect of force on an object, identify the direction of net force in a given situation, and identify the type of force applied in a given situation. Let's analyze the situations we observed earlier. Can you make out exactly what Tina and James are doing in each situation? In the first situation, James is pulling a wooden log.
Oof, this is heavy.
In the second situation, James is hitting or pushing a ball.
Okay, what a load of stuff. Now for billing.
In the third situation, Tina is pushing a shop cart towards the billing counter.
Move out of my way.
Don't push me, you move.
Finally, in the fourth situation, Tina and James are both pushing each other with equal force. That's why neither of them is moving. So, what's the conclusion? Did you notice that James and Tina are either pushing or pulling when they apply force? Therefore, we can say that force is the push or pull that occurs due to the interaction of two bodies. Force is generally denoted by the capital letter F. Now let's look at the other aspect of force, its impact. What are the effects of force applied on objects? A force can change the state of rest or of motion of the object on which it is applied. The state of motion of an object is described by its speed and the direction of its motion. If the speed of an object is 0, it is said to be at rest, else it is in motion. To understand better, let's observe a car race with James.
The race has started. Look at all those cars shooting off.
The cars that were at rest are now driving at a high speed. In other words, their state of motion has changed. However, the audience is still at rest. A change in speed always results in the change in state of motion. To understand how force changes the state of motion of a body, let's check out some of the scenarios from our everyday lives. Here, Tina is in the park walking the dog.
Terry, slow down.
She is trying to stop the dog from running away. On the other hand, look at James pushing the shopping cart, which is initially at rest. Both Tina and James are applying force. What is the effect of force on Tina's dog and on James's shopping cart? You observed that the dog was moving and it stopped when Tina applied force on its leash, whereas the shopping cart was stationary before James pushed it. Now let's observe what happens when James plays hockey.
James, faster, towards the goal.
The ball ahead of him is moving with slow speed. When James hits the ball again in the same direction, it moves with more speed. While playing hockey, James flicks the ball passed to him towards the goal by applying force through his hockey stick. In doing so, he changes the direction in which the ball was moving. You can say a force can change the direction of motion of the object on which it is applied. Now, let's look at what James and Tina are up to.
Hey, those are some interesting shapes.
Yeah, let's see how he does it.
Look at how the balloon vendor is blowing the balloons and then squeezing them to make funny shapes. He changes the shape of the balloon by applying force at different points on the balloon. Tina does something similar when she uses plasticine to make cartoon characters in her modeling class. She models the clay by pressing it with her fingers at various points. So, as you can see, force can change the shape of the object on which it is applied. That is, what happens when you crumble a piece of paper? The shape of the paper changes, right? To summarize, a force may change the state of motion of an object, change the direction of motion of an object, or change the shape of an object. We spoke about the push and pull types of force as well as the effects of force. How about the magnitude of a force? Are all forces equal? Let's observe Tina and James in a competition.
I bet I can kick this ball farther than you can.
Really? Let me see.
Looks like James won. He could kick the ball further because he applied more force. The force applied by Tina and James differed in quantity or magnitude, even though it was a push force in both cases, and resulted in the movement of the ball across the field. To sum up, the quantity of force is known as its magnitude, which is the measure of the force. A larger force has more magnitude and vice versa. So far, you have seen effects of single forces in terms of pulling and pushing. But in real life, there are often multiple forces acting on a body simultaneously. In such cases, we must consider the result of the multiple forces acting on the body. This resultant force is called the net force. Sounds confusing? Let's look at some examples. Tina is applying force to push the table to the wall, but she is unable to do so. The table seems to be too heavy for her to push forward alone.
Hey James, come, lend me a hand please.
Observe what happens now. When James and Tina both pushed the table together, it was easier for them to move the table. This shows net force is bigger than the individual forces, in this case, where the individual forces act in the same direction. Conversely, the net force can reduce when two forces act in opposite directions. Do you remember the story of the two goats crossing a narrow bridge in opposite directions? Neither of them wanted to go back and give way to the other. They pushed at each other and were initially stuck in one spot. However, the bigger goat kept pushing with increasing force till the other goat gave way. Here, the net force was 0 initially, as both the goats were pushing in opposite directions with equal force. When the bigger goat increased the force applied, it succeeded in moving ahead. The net force in this case acted in the direction of the individual force that was of higher magnitude. Observing these scenarios, we can conclude that in the case of multiple forces applied on an object, if the two forces act in the same direction on an object, the net force acting on it is the sum of both the forces. Conversely, if the two forces act in the opposite direction on an object, the net force acting on it is the difference between the two forces. Therefore, net force is the sum of all the forces acting on the body. The magnitude and direction of the net force on the body depends on the magnitudes of the individual forces and their directions. Hey Tina! Hi James!
Hi Miss Curious, what mysteries are you solving today?
Well, I'm exploring concepts related to force. And I have a couple of questions for you. Tina, can you lift your shopping bag without holding it? James, can you pull open a desk drawer without touching it?
Of course not. That's a silly question.
Right.
I agree. So, generally, objects have to be in contact for the application of force.
Absolutely.
But I can think of a situation where force is applied even though you cannot see the contact between objects. Can you guess where this is possible?
It's a magnet you are talking about.
You got it. A magnet can attract a nail towards itself without even touching it, right? Hence, we can classify forces as contact forces or non-contact forces. A contact force is a force between two objects that are in contact with each other. Any force that is exerted without any contact between two bodies is a non-contact force. There are two very common examples of contact forces that you observe often. They are muscular force and frictional force.
I understand muscular force. I have well-developed muscles.
That's right. Muscular force is any force exerted by a person using muscles. Muscular force enables us to perform all activities involving the movement or bending of our body. Muscular force is involved in all your actions. For example, when you throw a ball, ride a bicycle, or lift weights. But it's not limited to human beings. You see animals walking, galloping, or eating. All these actions also involve muscular force. Animals like bullocks, horses, and donkeys are used to draw carts and perform other tasks for us. All these animals use muscular force to perform such tasks.
So, what about the other contact force? Frictional force?
Frictional force is the force that opposes motion. That is, it acts in a direction opposite to that of motion.
Where can we see friction in action?
Consider a ball rolling in the field. You'll notice that it comes to rest in few moments. Now, look at this car when the engine has been switched off. Its speed decreases gradually. Finally, it stops. Do you observe anybody exerting force to stop the car or the ball?
Nobody.
Even then, something seemed to stop the movement of both these objects, right? Friction is responsible for changing the state of motion of objects in both these situations.
But what about non-contact forces? Are there any other non-contact forces apart from magnetic force?
As a matter of fact, there are. Non-contact forces can be magnetic force, electrostatic force, or gravitational force. Let's consider them one by one. The force exerted by a magnet on a certain metallic object or another magnet is known as magnetic force.
Dad gave me a magnet the other day. He was showing me his toolkit, and I discovered that the magnet was attracting all the nails in the box.
Yes, magnetic force can do that. Let's show Tina as well. Take a few shoe nails and place them in one end of a wooden table. Bring a magnet and place it on the farther end of the table. You see no change in the position or state of motion of the nails. Now, bring the magnet closer to the nails gradually, dragging it over the table. As the magnet comes near enough to the nails, you observe that the nails start shifting position and trying to get closer to the magnet. Bring the magnet even closer to the nails. The nails eventually get attached to the magnet.
But magnets can repel also, right?
Yes, you may have learnt in your class that the like poles of a magnet repel each other. If you place two magnets with their like poles facing each other and try to bring them closer, you will find that the magnets are resisting the movement. They are pushing each other away. So, can you see how magnets exert pull as well as push force on each other?
You're right. The magnet pulls nails to it, but it pushes away the like pole of another magnet, and all without actual contact with the nails or the other magnet.
Very good.
So, what about electrostatic force? Is that related to electricity?
Good guess. Electrostatic force is the force exerted by a charged body on another charged or uncharged body. Have you ever noticed how your comb crackles when you pull it through your hair?
Yes, quite often.
If you bring such a freshly used comb near bits of paper, you'll observe that the paper bits come and attach themselves to the comb. This is due to electrostatic force. The comb gets charged while you are combing your hair. Now, let's see Tina drop a ball from the balcony.
Now I'll have to go down to get it.
But why do you think it went down? Why didn't it float around in the air?
How can it? Everything comes down to earth, whatever height you drop it from.
You're right. But there is a reason for that. The earth exerts a force of attraction on all bodies on and near its surface. This force of attraction exerted by the earth on any other body is called gravity. In fact, like earth, all bodies in the universe attract each other. The force with which all bodies in the universe attract each other is called gravitational force.
Oh, Dad was saying something about Newton and gravity the other day.
Newton started thinking about gravitational force when an apple fell from a tree on his head one day. He started wondering why the apple didn't stay up. This brings you to the end of this lesson on force. Now, you should be able to define force, identify the effect of force on an object, identify the direction of net force in a given situation, and identify the type of force applied in a given situation.